I got so used to being the only woman in the room, I didn't even notice it anymore. Did you know that only 31% of sales leaders are women, even though 50% of the sales reps are women? I'm Amy Evans. After 25 years of sales leadership in corporate America, I help B2B tech and AI CEOs hit their number as a sales strategy advisor. I also host the Women in Sales Leadership podcast, where you'll learn what it takes to lead at the highest level, withstand the pressure to deliver the numbers, and elevate your career without losing yourself. No fluff, just the real stuff of women in sales leadership. If you aspire to become a CRO, vice president, first-time sales leader, or start your own business, you're in the right place. You are going to want to stop right now and click follow so you don't miss the episodes that drop every week. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Women in Sales Leadership podcast. I figured before we got started with our very exciting guests that I have in our upcoming episodes, I wanted to give you a sense of this podcast, what it is, who am I, what are we doing here, and more importantly, why should you listen? So I'm going to do my best to get that covered for you, and I'm looking forward to getting your feedback on other things, episodes that we will want to have, topics that you want to have covered, and so on. So why don't we begin at the beginning? I'll introduce myself, and then I'll give you a little bit of feedback about, why did I start this podcast, and why am I passionate about it, and what are we trying to achieve? What am I trying to achieve with it? You'll hear me say we a lot because I think about my listeners and all my folks as a team. I'm a very team-oriented person. I love working with teams and have had wonderful teams my whole career. So it's good to meet you. My name is Amy Evans. So for the past 25 years, I have had the wonderful experience of being in corporate America in sales. I didn't start in sales. I never wanted to be in sales. In fact, when I was a student at the University of Wyoming, I was studying pre-med and thought I'd go be a doctor, very specifically a doctor of osteopathy, which is a more holistic medicine approach. In retrospect, maybe that's what I should have done, but that's not what I did. And here I am. What actually happened was I moved to Atlanta from Wyoming, where I grew up, and I knew nobody here, and got a job with a nonprofit organization. I would have never told anybody this at the time, but it was a sales job. It absolutely was. I was working for a collegiate honor society called Golden Key International Honor Society, and I made some lifelong friends, some people that I am super close with yet today, and who have had such a huge impact and influence in my life. So I spent a couple years doing that, traveling around the country. It was like the perfect job for a person who had never traveled anywhere, which was me. I'd maybe traveled to a couple states, and I don't even think I'd been out of the country at that point in my life. Anyway, it was a great chance for me to have my eyes open and see the world. And I have hilarious stories that I'll maybe tell some other day from that experience. What happened after I left that nonprofit organization was I got my first real sales job, sales title job. And it was for a startup company called Employees. For anybody who's from my old employees crew, many of them are senior executive leaders at ADP now. But shout out to my old friends and family at Employees. And I started there where a lot of people begin their sales career. I was cold calling. I was generating leads. Some people call them BDRs. Some people call them SDRs. Use whatever three-letter acronym is your favorite. I was pounding the phones every single day and generating leads for the outside sales team to sell what was really remarkable back in 2000, the year 2000, to be selling software as a service. So technology that was delivered over the internet. Yes, folks, we did demos where we brought discs, CDs, for those who are familiar. We brought CDs of AOL to some of our demos so that we could dial up and get online when we were on site with a customer. So I started there. And while I was at Employees, I decided that, maybe it was time for me to go back and get some more education because I had this pre-med degree in biology and Russian language. More on that later. I felt like I should have some more formal business education. And so everybody and their dog at that time was going back and getting an MBA. Like it was the thing to do, especially if you wanted to move up and you wanted to advance yourself in your career and make more money, which as a state college graduate who had taken out loans along with some small scholarships to pay for my school, I needed all the cash I could get to pay to live. I enrolled in a part-time MBA program at Georgia State University. And I worked I worked during the day and I went to university at night. And I did that in about 2.5 years. I came out of that program and it was like a black hole that I fell in of pop culture. So anything that happened during that period of my life, I do not recall anything besides work and school and pretty much nothing else in that period. So I graduated Georgia State with an MBA in management and felt like, here I am, like I now have the credential. And I remember walking into COO's office. He served as both the COO and the VP of sales for a while at the startup at Employees. And I said, hey, I have this MBA. And I was so naive. I thought, this was like my ticket to get out of being in inside sales, which I had moved up into inside sales. And it was my ticket to outside sales because now suddenly, because I had this piece of paper, I was somehow qualified to be an outside sales rep. And I remember having this really interesting back and forth between the COO, who was a gentleman, and, he was very straight with me. Here's what he said. He said, Amy, look, we don't have time to train you. We don't have a training program. You would have to figure all this out on your own. And I just don't know that this is going to work. And of course, I was at that point in my youth and my career where like no was a word that I just didn't quite compute. I didn't understand what that meant. So I must have worn him down. And he did give me an outside sales position. And I was so excited about it because I thought, here I am. I've finally arrived. I can pay back these other loans that I've taken out for my MBA program. I can continue to pay off my loans from my undergraduate. I might actually be able to afford buying a condo. Hey, I'm pausing the show for a moment to make a request. Please take 2 seconds and subscribe, follow this show in whatever app you're listening to it on. And if you really want to be generous, you could also choose to take another 2 seconds and leave a star review. It will go a long way to making sure that this show gets in the hands of listeners just like you who need to hear these stories and want to make a difference. Thank you, and back to the show, which is what I wanted to do. One of the things that's been a commitment through my whole life, not just ongoing education and improvement for knowledge, practical knowledge that you would use in work and your day-to-day. I also have been very focused for myself in personal development. I get a big kick out of doing that work. It's hard work. It's confronting work. It's work that makes you wonder, why did I say I wanted to do this work? And there are many times I had those moments. But one of the things I did right as I was coming out of that MBA program was I got introduced by some friends into a personal development program called Landmark Education. And I believe they're called Landmark Worldwide now. And I participated in their programs. And I don't know what you may or may not know about that group, but I could never speak highly enough about them. in a 3-day weekend seminar for myself as a very young woman. I mean, I was probably, 20, in my mid-20s at that point. I was able to just really get clear about what my life was about. I was able to get really clear about who I was. And I was given some tools that helped me throughout the rest of my career really distinguish between what mattered and what didn't matter, and also what was real and not real. More on that later. We as human beings, every single one of us, tend to make up a lot of stories about what's happening, regardless of what's maybe true or not true, because we're always looking for meaning. Like, what does it mean? Why did they do that? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? We, in absence of factual information, we're apt to make up our own story. We see this all the time. Anyway, so that weekend program at Landmark Education, Landmark Worldwide, was pivotal for me. It prepared me in so many ways to not only be a more effective sales professional, but also eventually for my journey into leadership. It took me a while in my life, in my professional life, to really embrace the fact that I was a leader. And leadership, some people say people are natural born leaders. Maybe some of that's true. I don't know. I believe that leadership is more of an awareness. It's more of a commitment, and it's more of an alignment to others beyond just yourself, and a connectivity to a team, and a willingness, quite frankly, to step into a place where sometimes people hesitate to be, which is in the front, in leadership. I knew I wanted to be a leader, felt it in my heart, I felt it in my bones, but I was afraid. Like everybody's afraid. You know, those little voices that try to tell you that you can't do something. I began to really realize that I wanted to truly be a leader. I'd had tastes of leadership before. When I was a student at the University of Wyoming, I had been involved with this organization I mentioned earlier, my first job, called Golden Key at the International Honor Society, and I was president of the chapter of that organization on campus, and it was one of the largest organizations on campus. I loved that experience. So fast forward to my young career days, the startup I was with gets bought by ADP. And when I say ADP, some people may not know who ADP is. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Chances are that you have received a paycheck that was processed by ADP or calculated by ADP, or somehow the money was moved from your employer's bank account into your bank account via ADP technology. So ADP is a very large Fortune 200 payroll company, and they've expanded their services way beyond payroll, but that's really what their flagship products were known for at the time. ADP bought employees, that startup. And so then I had an opportunity to shift and transition my learning and my experience and my selling from this like nimble startup where I was selling the deal, I was demoing the deal, I was doing the quotes, I was doing everything, right? It was a one-stop shop called Me in the Middle, to, this big corporate machine, sales machine, and such a beautiful sales machine ADP is. It's an absolute remarkable sales culture. So I got to spend a few years there in both their mid-market team and major accounts and their upmarket team they called national accounts, and again, made lifelong friendships there. Learned more how to sell in a team environment where we would have, one salesperson quarterbacking the deal or quarterbacking the account, and then specialists would come in and represent different products to position to the customer. So phenomenal experience there. I got experience on the partner side of the business. I got experience in launching new products that nobody ever sold before. I sold some deals that were like the first standalone product deals where we didn't have payroll in that account, and we're never going to have payroll in that account. But we had some of the products and services that my team was responsible for. And I met some phenomenal, not only phenomenal sales leaders, but also colleagues. And it was the first time in my career that I ever was on a team that was primarily women. And the last time, by the way, that it was primarily women who were sales executives, individual contributors in the national account space in the ADP office in Alpharetta, Georgia, which is just north of Atlanta. So that was a remarkable experience. And while I was there, I raised my hand. I was like, I'm ready for leadership. Finding myself, I kept finding myself as an informal leader. I would coach people. I would counsel them. I would help them navigate challenging situations, both with customers and in and among our team, quite frankly. And I liked doing that. I liked supporting my team that way. And I got a lot of very kind and positive feedback from my teammates. So I raised my hand to say, hey, I'm ready for formal leadership. Like, I've got this MBA, I've got all this experience, right? I felt like I had a really good story to tell. And I had, it took me 2 times to raise my hand for that, to be considered for a formal leadership training program at ADP before I found I was given the opportunity to do that. I was accepted to that program, and I had a change. I had the person who had hired me, one of my mentors, a very influential female leader in my life and my career. The woman that hired me, I got shifted to a different team, and I was no longer reporting to her. And if anybody's had this happen before, this is one of those moments of truth where if you're the leader taking over, you have got to be aware that everybody on your team is leery of a change. So these are those moments of truth. We'll talk about this in the podcast, like how do you navigate these things? It was occurring to me at that time, though, and what it opened up for me was I hadn't been previously thinking about leaving ADP or looking outside of that company. Suddenly, I had a new manager who was coming in. I didn't know him, and I was suddenly open to phone calls from recruiters. And I was lucky enough to get referred into a small boutique systems integrator, so implementer, if you will, for those who may not know that terminology, of Workday, to go and start a new team at that and go sell some of their largest accounts, because previously that company had only sold to the small and mid-market space. And there was tremendous upside opportunity to just build out this organization. It was all in the human capital technology space. So HCM, for those who may know those words and that acronym. I left ADP to go work for this boutique firm, and all those things happened. Went from 0 in revenue on my team to, by the time I left it, we were doing $42 million in total contract value and had closed, multi-million-dollar deals with name brand companies that you all know, and really elevated that company and allowed for the founders to enjoy a $150 million exit from the business, which was great for them. Anyway, I left that place and I went to go have a run at my first national sales job, where I would be running U.S. and Canadian sales team fully for a business unit. In that situation, it was, my goodness, transformation doesn't even begin to describe the word. I mean, that the sales team was in a ditch. The product was light years behind the competition, and the team was posting up negative year-over-year growth in an economic environment where everybody else was growing by double digits. So it was bad. I came in, restructured that team, recast a go-to-market strategy, redid comp plans, redid sales targets, got executive teams involved, get finance involved, got comp involved, got my leadership, the folks that reported to me on my team involved, and everybody aligned on redoing and relaunching and kind of recasting a vision of success for that team. And we pulled it off. In the first 6 months, we hit our 6-month objectives, and the following year we hit the next year objectives, and the same for the second year. And I got another phone call. So this one was from a company maybe you have heard of called Salesforce. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the kind of company that does not typically recruit externally for second line leadership roles. This was an area vice president role for what you and I would think of as a mid-market space. And it was regional geography at that time. So I came in, interviewed, I had competition for that role that were, internal individuals. And I think the only thing that got me that job was me and my story, which I happened to tell really well. And the woman that recruited me, she was from outside of Salesforce. And so she had a very unique perspective on wanting to expand the individuals on the team who were outside of Salesforce and didn't grow up in Salesforce. So I enjoyed 3 years at Salesforce. Phenomenal. But my first year was COVID. We all know what happened there. I'm very proud of what happened with the team. In fact, some of my core leadership learnings and principles came out of that year of 2020. And then once we set a baseline for how we were going to run and operate and relate and support each other, we absolutely blew it out the following year. And then at the beginning of 2023, I was one of 10,000 people that was let go as part of a huge layoff and a commitment that Salesforce had made to its shareholders to decrease costs and get back to operating margins that were in line with what their investors demand. And quite frankly, they should have been doing all along. So that gave me a chance to do something I have never done before, which is in my adult life, which has been since I was 14 years old. I've always had a job. I did not have a job. And after I received the email letting me know that my position was no longer a part of the company on the first day of the fiscal year, after just working nonstop for about 4 weeks straight to get the deals done that we got done, I went into a grief mode. I cried. I slept a lot. And I needed to, quite frankly, grieve the position, grieve losing begin to open up to the idea that I'm not my job. And I never was my job. I'm not how much money I make. And I've never been how much money I make. Right? And all of this was happening at a time in my life 2 months after I had initiated a separation from my then husband of 16 years. And after we had made some pretty valiant efforts to keep our marriage together and keep it working, I woke up one day after many years of realizing that things weren't working, and I said, I can't do this anymore. And that turns out to be about 3 months. 3 months before I was laid off from Salesforce. So here I am. I'm going through the huge transformation, separation, and divorce, which if anybody's been through that, like those words don't even do service to what that experience is like. And I'm also going through this professional transformation, really stripping me down to who am I and what is my life about? So this is who I am. and this is what my life is about. I'm Amy Evans, and I'm a mother, I'm a leader, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, and I'm a friend. I also am a member of a very beautiful community in Atlanta. I have reignited my spirituality that was always there. I have really gotten clear about what my life is about. And what my life is about is making a difference. And the way that I'm going to make a difference with this podcast is that there's never been a podcast, and this is the first one of its kind, that is for and about women in sales leadership. Maybe you know the stats. Maybe you just know it by looking around. But in case you want some data, the data says that half of the sales reps out there are women. So if you're lucky to be working in an industry where there are equal representation, that's beautiful. When it comes to sales leadership, though, it's only 30% of sales leaders are women. The data is out there that demonstrates the strength that women in leadership bring to all teams and all functional areas of every aspect of business, government, and community. And I want this place to be a place for you to hear other women's stories, to get inspired, to be entertained, and to have a place where you're with people who understand and see you and see what you're dealing with, what is working, what might not be working, what the struggles are, what the victories are, and celebrate all of that, the pain, the glory, right? And the victory of doing this work. And if I do it right, then ideally it'll have an impact, not just on women who are already in leadership and sales leadership, which is, it's lonely in that space, can be lonely. Also, I'm optimistic that we might attract some women in sales who want to be in leadership. And if you know right now that there's somebody who should be subscribed or following this podcast, please stop right now and take a minute and forward the link to them. It's a small group that we're in. We're in a small club, and my aim is to make this club larger and to celebrate the beauty that it is, because I'm up to building something that is beautiful, inspirational, and makes a difference and brightens your day. So welcome to the Women in Sales Leadership podcast. I'm so delighted you're along for the ride. It's going to be very fun. And the last thing I'll share with you is, if you would love to be on this show, do not hide. Please step out into the light. Give yourself permission to shine. You have a story to tell. Your story is a story that somebody needs to hear. There's also victory and growth in sharing your story with the world. So I hope you have a beautiful day. Stay well. And remember, this job is fun. Take care, everybody.